can't believe I'm here, playing for my life tonight.
I can't believe I'm here, I made it, I'm playing for my life tonight. I'm a shining light. I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe I'm here, playing for our life tonight. Yeah, I'm playing for our life tonight.
Welcome, friends, to Kingdom Driven Sports. My name is Kevin Sunthimer, and I'm your host. Thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate your support, and I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to come support my channel and to view the content that I'm putting out. I hope for your continued support as I continue to explore this new chapter in my life of video podcasting. I also want to say thank you for your patience as I learn how to edit and make these videos. I promise I'll get better and continue to work on those editing skills. But I do hope that you've enjoyed the content so far. And I hope that you've had a wonderful day so far and that you'll enjoy this video as well. This is going to be a similar video to my previous one. In my previous video, I talked about how I got into the sport of baseball, what I love about it, what it was like growing up in the 90s and rooting for those 1990s Indians teams that were loaded and had lots of talent. Unfortunately, they never were able to close the deal and win a World Series. They came close, but they never did actually win one. But it was still a lot of fun to root for those teams, to have favorite players, and to just be able to even go to watch them play. And seeing that I lived in California, I got to go see them play the Angels, and that was a lot of fun. So I wanted to do a similar video in that regard this time as well, but for a different sport. Today's sport, we're going to be talking about basketball. I wanted to do a basketball one because we are in the midst of March Madness. I was hoping to put out a video with some March Madness content, specifically filling out a bracket together. Just in the process of trying to get the podcast launched and to make sure that it would be quality content. Just time did not permit for me to be able to do that. So instead of doing like a bracket, I'm going to be putting out an episode covering the games as they progress, hopefully down like to the Final Four, where we can talk about the Final Four and the teams that make it that far, and as well as any upsets that we've seen throughout the tournament. So be on the lookout for that. I'm in the process of trying to get that piece together and ready for recording so that I can put it out as what I would refer to as the first official episode. I also want to cover things like NFL free agency and the draft coming up, but I thought March Madness, even though I'm not going to be able to do one where we fill out a bracket together, I still think that's a great place to launch the podcast with an official episode. But this is still like bonus content, a mini episode about how I got into basketball. I, again, grew up in the 90s, and if you saw my last video, I shared that my dad, he was born and raised in the Akron, Ohio area, and so he grew up for baseball Cleveland Indians fan, and that also meant that he rooted for the Cleveland Cavaliers in the NBA. And again, because I wanted to be like my dad, I grew up rooting for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, while I got into baseball first, basketball was soon after. It was around probably the 96, 97 season, really, that I started paying attention at least to basketball. And of course, I had heard of Michael Jordan. I knew some of the basics of how basketball worked, but I began to grow interest in paying attention to the games and what they were like. And like I said, at the time, because my dad was a big Cleveland Cavaliers fan, I was like, I'm going to be a Cleveland Cavaliers fan as well. And lo and behold, I'm still a Cleveland Cavaliers fan, excited about how they're doing this year, although I'll comment on the current state of the NBA here soon. But I first wanted to address my first favorite player, Now that you know that I'm a Cavs fan, but then I remember my first favorite player was Terrell Brandon. And he was a point guard for the Cleveland Cavaliers in the 90s. He became my favorite player because point guard became my favorite position. I loved that position. I thought that's the best position to play because you are like the general of the floor, the quarterback of the floor. You're running the plays. You get to direct traffic in a sense. And I just thought that was a great position. I still love the position of point guard. But because he was at the time the Cleveland Cavaliers point guard, I was like, that's going to be my favorite player. And he was a really good player, Terrell Brandon was. But strangely enough, again, this goes back to my previous video. As I shared in that video, Kenny Lofton was my first favorite player on the Cleveland Indians. But it was like 2 or 3 years into my following them that he got traded to the Atlanta Braves for David Justice. And while something similar happened in basketball, my basketball journey, Terrell Brandon was with the Cavs, I think 2 years, maybe 3. And he got traded to the Milwaukee Bucks in a 3-team trade that landed Shawn Kemp in Cleveland. And that was exciting because Shawn Kemp was an all-star caliber player. He had an excellent career up to that point. And so people in Cleveland obviously were excited to get the Rain Man, Shawn Kemp, on the team and with the hopes that he could maybe lead us to the promised land. And spoiler alert, no, he didn't. But still, it was exciting because a player of his caliber was now on the Cleveland Cavaliers. As a kid, I was bummed, though, because, again, Terrell Brandon was my favorite player, and now he was no longer on the team. Shawn Kemp was, I had nothing against him. Almost felt, though, as if he was on the later part of his prime, that he was on the wrong side of his prime, where he had already had several great years. He came off an all-star year, so he was obviously still playing at a very high level. But I definitely think, even looking back now, that it was in the second half of his prime towards, not towards the beginning, but closer towards the end. He did well for the Cavs. We got to the playoffs, I think, 2 times between 95 and 2002 before the arrival of LeBron James. And we only made it twice, and in those two times we were eliminated, I think, in the first round. Once by the Knicks and I think once by the Pacers. But still, through thick and thin, I was still a Cleveland Cavaliers fan. And it wasn't until really college, senior year high school, I got into more being a huge fan of Jordan. He was on the Wizards at the time. And I felt like I hadn't, because I was so new into the game, I didn't really get a chance to respect how great he was. I also think was a little bit biased because being a Cleveland Cavaliers fan, I didn't want to see the Chicago Bulls succeed. But once I got into it a little bit more and realized that Michael Jordan was a once-in-a-generation player, once-in-a-lifetime player, I gained the utmost respect for him. And even had a Wizards Michael Jordan jersey. I remember I was so excited to get it and to wear it because it was Michael Jordan, arguably the greatest player of all time. And so I got into playing basketball more towards my senior year in high school. And then definitely in college, the first year and a half, I went to Oral Roberts University, and they had a gym, like a workout facility where you could go, and they had several basketball courts. So I was there almost every night wanting to play, whether it was just shooting around or playing pickup basketball games. I was there for several hours most days during that first year and a half. Unlike baseball, where I had pretty much zero skill, I at least had some skills. Not enough to impress anyone, nothing like that. But I could shoot the ball, and could shoot 3-pointers, I could do a mid-range shot, and I could pass the ball. I couldn't dribble very well because I'm very right-handed. And even with being very right-handed, I couldn't do anything very special dribble-wise. I was slow. speed is not a Sunthimer forte. And so it wasn't like I was fast, but I could pass the ball and I could shoot the ball pretty well. So basketball for me, in a sense, was a little bit more fun to play because I had a little bit more of a skill set suited for playing basketball. Again, not great, nothing elite, not even close, but still enough to where I'm like, okay, I can play this game and not embarrass myself. It was during that time I really got into playing basketball, and then I started paying more attention to basketball and watching it, whether it be NBA or collegiate. I really got into collegiate basketball during my college years because my friends and I, we would go watch the ORU basketball teams play, men's and women's. We would go to their games often to watch them play because students got in free, and it was just a lot of fun. And even though Oral Roberts University is not a basketball program powerhouse, it was still a lot of fun, especially because during my time there, we actually ended up making the NCAA tournament for the first time in 20 years or something like that. And we made it, I think, 2 or 3 times. And so that was a lot of fun to go and participate in that environment and to root on the ORU Golden Eagles. And that is, to this day, still my favorite collegiate basketball team. I went to school there. I got to see them play, and it's just very nostalgic and holds a special place in my heart. And then, of course, with the NBA, I loved rooting for the Cleveland Cavaliers. It was exciting when LeBron first arrived, and it looked like we could definitely at some point win a championship with him. And at the same time, it was very devastating when he decided to go to Miami, and he did end up winning championships there, 2 of them. And so it was hard as a Cavs fan to watch him go. I'm not going to lie and sit here and tell you that I wasn't bitter that he left or that I wasn't angry. But in the end, as I've matured and grown, hopefully a little bit wiser, it was a business decision on his part, and he had the right to make that choice because that was his choice to make. Now, I am grateful that he came back, and him and Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love helped bring a championship to Cleveland. That was an awesome year. That was surreal because that really was my first professional championship experience for any of my favorite teams. And so that was pretty cool to experience. And in fact, that same year, the Indians almost won the World Series. And the Cubs ended up coming back to win that. But it was a good year for sports for me. Even though the Indians didn't win the World Series that year, it was still it was cool that they made it to the World Series and almost won. But the Cubs, they had been heartbroken for so many years. So it didn't bother me that they won the World Series. I was glad to see that they finally were able to get that chip off their shoulder, that weight off their back, that about the curse since 1908, I believe it was. But that's baseball, so we'll go back to basketball. But the Cleveland Cavaliers, they did win their championship that year against the Golden State Warriors, who many thought were going to win the championship. They had finished the season 73-9 and looked like they were just going to, glide on through to another championship. But I think one of the main factors of that was that Draymond Green got suspended for that 5th game in the series. And I really think that helped swing the momentum towards the Cavaliers. And they just never lost that momentum. They ended up winning the championship, and it was a fantastic season for the Cavaliers and what they were able to accomplish. Now, of course, LeBron James did end up leaving again. He went to the Lakers, where he is still at there now with Luka Doncic, if you can believe that. And it looks like they have been trying to work back to another championship. I think they won in 2020. So I have nothing against LeBron James. I don't quite agree with his politics and some of the things he says, but in regards to his play and his talent, he's one of the best to ever do it. Very few people have have his build, his speed, and his athletic ability. So my hat's off to him, and thanks to him for helping bring the Cavaliers a championship in 2016. All that being said, having gone back and watched Jordan, he has got to still be in my opinion, the best player to ever play. Kobe maybe comes closest to what Michael Jordan was, because Kobe had that killer instinct as well, and he had his moves. And sad though is that, of course, Kobe passed away. I thought it was a hoax when I heard that, but it ended up being real. And it's just sad that that happened. But again, my hat's off to both Jordan and Kobe for being arguably the two best players in the game, definitely over the last 30, 35 years. While when I was a kid, I didn't really get to appreciate Jordan during his Bulls days, because I was new to the sport right when he was getting ready to retire. I got in around 96, 97, I think, was when I really started following, and he retired in 98 before coming back to the Wizards. But then when he came back to the Wizards, I definitely respected him a lot more and paid attention to what he was doing. But he was definitely not the same Michael Jordan he was when he was on the Bulls. Like they like to say, Father Time is undefeated, and you could see that. And that being said, he still played better than any 40-year-old I can think of, the way he played during that time. Almost got the Wizards to the playoffs, too. Looking back now, I am so appreciative of that Bulls team, especially after I'd watched a documentary, The Last Dance, which showed his desire to win and what he would do in order to win. I have a deeper respect for Michael Jordan, for Kobe Bryant, for Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, and a lot of those players of that era, even those that didn't win. John Stockton, Karl Malone, I think they just had the misfortune of running into that Bulls team with Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Steve Kerr. And it was just, it's tough to beat them. Yeah, but that's not to take anything away from those Jazz teams that made it to back-to-back NBA championships. They gave the Bulls a run for their money, and they had some great players. Karl Malone, think about Karl Malone. He's one of the greatest power forwards to ever play the game. John Stockton is arguably the greatest point guard to ever play the game when it comes to like fundamentals and just court vision and basketball IQ. Had they run into any other team, they probably at least have one championship, I think. That's arguable. It's debatable, but I think they had a great team. They just had the misfortune to run into the Bulls of the 90s. You look at other players at the time that were really good. Charles Barkley, he was toward the latter part of his career when I was getting into basketball. Patrick Ewing, David Robinson, Hakeem Olajuwon. You have, of course, Penny Hardaway and Grant Hill and Shaquille O'Neal. A bunch of great players of that era, and some that continued into the 2000s, and then some that had retired. Reggie Miller, you can't forget Reggie Miller. And then, of course, the 80s. If there was a way to time travel and go back and watch some of those series of the 80s between the Celtics and Lakers, I would definitely want to do that, because that decade really saved the NBA. The NBA was in a lot of trouble at that time, and the future of the NBA was uncertain. But then comes Magic Johnson and Larry Bird and the Boston Celtics and the Los Angeles Lakers, that rivalry. And that was just incredible, hearing documentaries and reading about what it was like to watch those games in the 80s, to be there, people who were there, to watch the battles between the Lakers and the Celtics. That was definitely something special, especially when you had the two best players in the league one on each of those teams. Magic Johnson on the Lakers and Larry Bird on the Celtics. And it was just can't miss basketball, and it really resurrected the NBA. Then you had the Pistons of the late 80s, early 90s, the Bad Boys. My dad will tell me stories about them. Bill Laimbeer. My dad thinks he's the dirtiest player to ever play, like elbows and uppercuts. dirty shots and all that. But that was the personality of the Pistons at that time. They were glad to be the villain, to play that role. I loved basketball of that era. I'm saying all this because I want to transition to what basketball has become. And I don't want to take anything away from the LeBron James, the Kevin Durant's, the Steph Curry's, and any other player, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Damian Lillard, Donovan Mitchell, all great players. But I think the style of basketball is different. And whereas I really appreciate basketball, the basketball that we're seeing now has lost its luster a little bit because it almost seems like it's turned into a 3-point shooting contest. Just back and forth, just teams launching threes back and forth. And I miss each team having their own identity. Now, yes, there would be several teams that had similar identities, just with different players, but it was different. And a lot of the NBA games I turn on now seem like a 3-point shooting contest where the players of each team are trying to see who can make the furthest 3-pointer. And they want to copy the Steph Curry type game. Nothing against Steph Curry. I think he is going to go down as the greatest shooter of all time. I also think he's one of a kind. And so, in the sense that how he revolutionized the game and his shooting style, how his comfort level in shooting a 3-pointer that is way beyond the 3-point line and consistently making it. I think a lot of other teams have been like, oh, we want to do that. That's really cool. And I think it has, in the long run, detracted from the game a bit because you're missing out on all these other styles of play. For instance, you remember the Mike D'Antoni Phoenix Suns that had Steve Nash and Amari Stoudemire and Sean Marion. I remember their rule was 7 seconds or less into the shot clock, the shot better be up. They wanted to keep a fast pace back and forth and wear the other team out. And that was their identity. But then you had other teams like San Antonio and the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers, when they had Shaq and Kobe and Derek Fisher, Rick Fox, it was feed it to Shaq and pretty much an inside-out game. Give it to Shaq. And if they start double teaming him or they start sending help to try to stop him, he can kick it out and find the open man. Same thing with the San Antonio Spurs with Tim Duncan, and back when they had Tim Duncan and David Robinson. Inside out, kick it in, see what the big man can do, and then kick it out. You had Dirk Nowitzki in the Dallas Mavericks, and he was a one-of-a-kind player. Not very many big men could shoot the ball the way he did. And so you had the Dallas Mavericks with their style, giving it to Dirk. But Dirk was not limited to just being under the basket. He could score from practically anywhere on the court. And you just had different styles, different teams with different identities. And I think that's somewhat been lost in today's NBA. I know they said something like the 3-point attempts have rocketed since Steph Curry's come into the league and really revolutionized it. And again, I'm not trying to throw shade or put blame on Steph Curry. It's not his fault. That's his style of game. And in fact, again, I believe whether I believe he should be or not, I believe he should be, but he's going to be in the Hall of Fame regardless. He is a once-in-a-generation player, go down as the greatest shooter to ever play the game. And it's not really that close because he is pulling away, building that gap between first and second when it comes to shooting. But I think a lot of other teams have treated it like a copycat league, and we want to find our Steph Curry who can shoot it from the other side of the court and regularly make it. And I think a lot of other teams have tried to adopt that identity, and it has taken a little bit of the uniqueness of the game out, it gets tiring. You're like, okay, I'd like to see something different. And that's one of the reasons I think, like when the Denver Nuggets won with Nikola Jokic, they had a little bit of a different team. He's a little bit of a different player. And also when Giannis Antetokounmpo and the Bucks won it, they won it old style. It wasn't just jacking up threes. And it was a little bit of their own character into their style of play. Now, to be fair, a lot of these championship teams that do win the championship, a lot of it goes beyond just their ability to make the three. They are willing to do the other things that are necessary. I'm just speaking in general terms. Most NBA games, a lot of the NBA games I've seen, it has just been pretty much what seems like a 3-point shooting contest. The game has lost a little bit of its luster also because it has become so politicized that has left a bad taste in my mouth. I always viewed sports as a good way to escape the outside world for a few hours. And so when they started bringing politics into it, it soured the sport a bit for me. I still, like I said, I pay attention. I'm rooting for the Cavaliers. I'm glad they're doing well. But I do hope some changes come to where we can see an appreciation for all sorts of different styles of play. I'm not saying get rid of this 3-point first mentality for every team, because for some teams, maybe that is the identity they want to have that works for them. But I do hope that something can be done to where other forms of winning basketball games, other styles, can be appreciated again, and that is not just a 3-point heaving contest every game. It's a beautiful game that displays teamwork at its best. This is beautiful to see when a team is running their system as one. It's one of the best examples, in my opinion, of watching 5 players work as one to accomplish a goal. So I'm hoping that we can return to the glory days of the NBA. I know they have been suffering in their viewership as of late. I think a lot of it has to do with the redundancy of the 3-point shots being heaved up in every game, and a desire to see either a return to something refreshing that many of us are nostalgic about, especially having grown up in the 90s and watching that great era of basketball and into the 2000s, or if it's just something new. I know that the NBA has been working to try to infuse some life into the league. So here's to hoping that they are able to do that. But that's just a little bit about me on basketball, my adoration of the Cavs, and how I've been following them since the mid to late 90s. But I'm also excited to hear who your favorite teams are. What got you into the NBA? What do you like about the NBA? Is there anything you don't like about the NBA? Do you like that it is a 3-point heavy league now? Or do you wish that it would return to the glory days? But I appreciate you joining me. Again, I hope this gives you a little bit of insight of what I like to see in the basketball games and why I follow it, and that it'll help us connect and just enjoy talking sports together. But always remember, God is good and Jesus loves you. I look forward to our next episode, and I thank you again for taking time out of your day to come watch my content. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And we're on Instagram. We're also on Spotify. We're on Rumble. So feel free to check us out there as well. And I look forward to our next video. God bless you. Have a great day.